G'day everyone, I'm AzureBlaze, and welcome to another episode of my Kirby and Mario Marathon. And this video is about Kirby's first SNES game, Kirby Superstar. This game is interesting, as it itself is not a full game. Instead, it is a collection of 7 smaller games, each with their own gimmicks and stories. Each game is laid out on a pinboard-styled menu screen, which is a really fun idea. It doesn't really relate to anything else in the game, however it is a fun idea nonetheless. Initially, there is only 4 modes unlocked, alongside 2 minigames. I may as well discuss the minigames first, as to get them out of the way. Megaton Punch involves a competition to see who can hit the ground the hardest, with Popstar splitting at different amounts for each. And Samurai Kirby has the player press a button, or as quickly as possible against some enemies. The fastest one will then take out the other. They're both fairly fun timing-based minigames, and they're good little time wasters. Before moving on to the main games, however, it is worth discussing the controls and the additions to this game. Each of the main games plays almost identically, with Kirby being able to walk, run, inhale, fly, copy, slide. Like with the previous game, Kirby's Dream Land 2. It controls fine. I don't think there's anything major, or any major issues at all with it. There's new hats. Kirby gets hats now when he inhales enemies, and yeah, I don't know, I think that's funny. However, a big new addition is the ability to use enemies and copy abilities to create partners that help with the battles. This is a fun idea, and I quite like it. However, the AI for the CPUs can be funny sometimes, or it does not really work properly. And I guess one last thing to talk about quickly before getting to the main levels is the music. I think it's great. Kirby music's always great. Yeah, I really like it. As for the main games, however, the first one is Spring Breeze, which is an entire remake of the original Kirby's Dream Land from the Game Boy. And I will not take too long talking about it, as I have made an entire video on the original game, and this is ultimately simply a different version of that same game. Yeah, I don't know, I won't talk about it too much. However, it does introduce the player to the newer SNES style the entire game uses. It looks great. It is quite detailed and sharp. It has loads of vibrancy and color. I think the game overall looks really, really good. The other new addition is being able to use copy abilities in the game, which is not a thing in the original. However, I can't really attest to this, as I didn't use them in the game itself. I played through the whole game without using any. Overall, this is fun. It's a fun reinvention, or I guess simply a normal remake of the original game, which I was quite happy to play through again, as I do really, really like the original. Next up is a Gourmet Race, which is an interesting little game. It feels almost as if it should be considered a mini-game in some senses. However, I think it is probably big enough to be considered one of the main games. It entails racing King Dedede to the end of 3 courses in a Grand Prix, whilst eating as much food as possible along the way. The character with the most food eaten by the end wins. The player can as well play each course separately in a time trial-like mode in order to try to get the best time possible. Also, it is a fun little mode. I feel it needs some more courses. I think it could really benefit from some different themes and some more difficulty. The mode I played next was Dynablade, and I really like this one. It involves essentially playing through some small traditional Kirby game, basically, to reach the final boss, Dynablade, and to stop her from destroying some crops, which she wants to feed to her children. I simply found it to be a really fun little romp, and Dynablade herself has a really neat design. I guess out of this entire package, this is what you would consider the new traditional Kirby game out of all of them. I like how in the end everyone ends up happy. Instead of using the crops, Kirby uses Wispywood's apples to feed her children before returning them to her, and they will fly away into the sunset. I like that. Also, I would not say it's anything extraordinary at all. I did enjoy it, and it is probably my favorite out of all the modes in this game. I then skipped over one for now and started up the newly unlocked Revenge of Meta Knight. I almost keep saying Meta Knight, Meta Knight's Revenge or something like that instead of Revenge of Meta Knight. It's called Revenge of Meta Knight. This is another really neat one. This time Kirby he goes to take down the Halberd and defeat the crew with him. I'm not 100% sure why or what they did. And this is the game that finally made me begin using copy abilities. as I realized during the Double Wispy Woods battle that the games are becoming way more dependent on them, with less ways to hit enemies without one, and with the inclusion of the partners, I found I ended up either like doing almost nothing whilst the partner did everything, or I ended up waiting around for ages for the game to give me something to fire back at the enemies. That became a massive problem, therefore I decided, yeah, I guess this is the time where I start using the copy abilities, and I'm glad I did. Perhaps the best part about this mode is walking, like, is watching the enemies speak as Kirby goes through everything. Like, Meta Knight's crew has like a text box down the bottom every now and then, and they talk about where Kirby's up to and what they can do to stop Kirby and all that sort of thing. They initially start off like extremely confident as they see Kirby as almost like a non-threat, before slowly changing to essentially groveling as Kirby destroys the halberd. In the end, Kirby has a battle against Meta Knight before fleeing the ship that ends up plummeting out of the sky. Whilst I'm not sure why Meta Knight is bad in this mode, taking out a ship is a fun spin on a Kirby story, and I like the progression that you see, especially for the characters that are in the game. After Revenge of Meta Knight, I then went back and started up the Great Cave Offensive, and I knew going into it that this was going to be a larger one. Great Cave Offensive involves travelling around an open map whilst trying to find treasure, of which there are 60 to collect. This is by far the mode that took me the longest, as I really wanted to find all the treasures before moving on, and I did end up succeeding in that. However, the 48th treasure, I'm going to have a little bit of a rant about it. It's the charm, and it is by far the worst to get, at least for me, and it's not because it was like difficult or anything. It was because of where it was hidden. There's like a part that has like a different colored block, and I had absolutely no idea that Kirby could fall through this one specific spot to find it in the water below. You had no idea that was down there either, like the camera didn't let you see it was there, and I could not find it. It was frustrating. It ended up being like one of the last treasures. I think it was the second last that I got, because I simply couldn't find it, and I ended up having to look it up, like where it was. The mode is great, however. There is a load to explore with many different locations like spread around the area. Like literally there's like a castle that you go in, then there's like mine stuff that you do. It's really interesting. There is one massive flaw I had with the mode, however, and that is the lack of a map. Trying to remember everywhere to go can be really frustrating at sometimes. It really reminds me of the Great Maze from Smash Bros. Brawl, although at the very least that did have a map. It was a confusing map, however it did have a map. And the final boss is like a giant stone hand creature thing, which is quite fun. I like how the parasol can stop like rocks from hitting Kirby on the head if you simply don't do anything and let the parasol be above him. I think that's funny. That's a really nice little thing, and I think you can even hit the rocks with like the hammer and stuff, which is fun. Next up is the now unlocked Milky Way Wishes mode, however, and this mode is really interesting. This is where Mark shows up for the first time. He has been shown throughout plenty of parts in the Kirby series, however this is where he shows up for the first time, and he convinces Kirby to travel to different worlds in order to find some stars. I'm not 100% sure how that works. I did look at the story, and he never said anything like that. However, that's what you do. You find some stars at the end of each world, and finding all will bring out Nova, of which Kirby is to make a wish to, which then Nova can stop the sun and the moon from battling each other over Popstar. It's a little bit more... there's more of a plot here than there's usually. However, even then, it's not that much. The game works a little bit differently. Instead of inhaling enemies to gain their abilities, deluxe copy abilities are like scattered around the planets. Once Kirby absorbs them, the player then keeps the copy ability and can switch between them on the fly. And honestly, this is a really like neat idea. I feel it is quite satisfying building this like repertoire of abilities that you have at your command, and like literally being able to switch between them. Oh, it's super fun. And the worlds themselves are quite interesting. Each is quite varied and have different gimmicks from the other, which makes it seem fresh, especially seeing as the visual style has stayed mostly the same throughout the entire package of the game. Then, after getting to Nova, Marx swoops in, hits Kirby out of the way, and wishes to rule Popstar, which... rude. However, before dealing with him, Kirby first enters Nova and takes out his defenses in a 2D ship section, which was interesting. Somehow finishing this blows up part of Nova. The parts fly off and Kirby leaves that part. I don't know, I understand how that works exactly, however it did. And then Kirby moves on to Marx, which is a really fun final boss. It's kind of creepy in a way as well. However, yeah, it is quite fun. And then somehow finishing this battle blows up the rest of Nova. And then Kirby goes back home to bed, because it's Kirby and he's adorable. I wouldn't expect anything less from the from the guy. This is a really fun mode, and I hope collecting abilities, like this mechanic, comes back at some time in the future. It is quite satisfying. I would like to see like a whole spin-off based around this like thing. I guess, I mean, would it be considered a roguelike? Not really. However, like you are like simply collecting the abilities is really fun. This then unlocks the final mode, which is the arena. And I did try it some number of times, however I never got too far. I think my best was like 7 bosses in or something like that, and then eventually I gave up because I simply couldn't do it and didn't have the time. Not that it's like too massive that I did do it. However, that is the end of Kirby Superstar. It was a really fun collection of games that cover a load of bases, which gives this whole package a fair amount of variety. I can definitely recommend this to anyone, as it adds a load to the franchise and feels like it modernizes the series as it moved into the SNES generation. However, that will be all for me for this episode. In the next episode, I will be going over Super Mario Bros. 3, which is something I'm very, very excited for. I've been really excited to get back to that game because I've played it a little bit. I have never finished it though, and I really want to. Therefore, yeah, I hope everybody enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and I shall be back in the next one. Cheers, everyone.